This is the Average Guy Network, and you have found Home Gadget Geeks, show number 269, recorded on July 14th, 2016. Here at Home Gadget Geeks, we cover all the favorite tech gadgets that find their way into your home. News, reviews, product updates, and conversation, all for the average tech guy. I'm your host, Jim Collison, broadcasting live from the Average Guy TV studios here in stormy Bellevue, Nebraska. And, of course, we post the show with world-class show notes each week out at theaverageguy.tv. You can also join us live now on the mobile app that's available for you. And we made that available. I want to thank LastPass for their sponsorship of that mobile app. Easy to get. Just head out to HomeGadgetGeeks.com, and there's just big fat buttons there for you. Just push on those. It'll take you to the right place based on your phone, and it will sign you up for the podcast. And so a great way to make sure you get Home Gadget Geeks every week. We'll thank LastPass for their sponsorship of the app, and easy way to do it every week. It's also a great way to listen on the road, by the way, if you want to stream it. Especially on iPhone, it's streaming only. I think on Android you can do some downloads, but you can. It's a great way if you're traveling on Thursdays to listen to Home Gadget Geeks. Of course, Home Gadget Geeks is a part of the Geeks Network. Find the links to this show, many other great podcasts. In fact, next week, Rich Hay is coming on from Windows Observer, and is going to kind of update us on all things, what's going on with the Windows update that's coming up here. The anniversary update actually launches August 2nd. Major Redstone update for Windows, and Rich Hay is going to come on. He's a part of the Geeks Network and does a podcast every single week based on Windows. Podcasts just like that and many others, thegeeksnetwork.com. Just a reminder, we have a Patreon link out at theaverageguy.tv if you're interested in supporting the show. If it's got a $5, you don't have to do it. It's just, I'll throw it out there. But if you do want to support the show, it's one of those kinds of things. You don't want to use the Amazon link or whatever. Of course, you can use Patreon. Mike, I think I'm going to throw $1 out there too, just because I think maybe $5 is too much for some people. So, what do you think?
Yeah, usually a good option. When I was doing it, you're just giving them a wide range of kind of options to like that. And
honestly, I don't care.
Yeah.
But some people want to support the show, and so if you want to do it that way, I get that question from time to time. How do I financially support you? But I don't want to use Amazon. There you go. Patreon's out there. Just head out to theaverageguy.tv. Look for the Patreon link, right-hand side down just a little bit. Boom. Click it, or go to theaverageguy.tv/support.
And we didn't prep the people last week for Amazon Prime Day, but I'm sure all the listeners remembered.
Yeah, was it as gimmicky this year as it was? I mean, last year was really bad. Okay.
Yeah, it was. So, but there were some decent deals out there, but most of the stuff was still very like, it's a garage sale that someone's trying to convince you that you need all the stuff that they have they don't want anymore. So it's more or less what it was.
The garage sale of Amazon.
Yeah.
Well, we're back. We're back. Unlike a garage sale, we're back talking about Bitcoin. And Edward, we had you on. I'm going to say it's show 223, which I think would have been July 25th of 2016. And no, I didn't remember that off the top of my head. I actually went out and looked at it. But Edward, welcome back to Home Gadget Geeks.
Yeah. How is this unlike a garage sale?
I was just trying to find a smooth segue. So we Mike and I joke all the time. I'll be saying something and then we'll say something else totally unrelated. And, we try to find the most creative way to segue between those two things. When we had you on last year talking about Bitcoin, we actually. We've seen a rise in the Bitcoin. I think you kind of predicted it. You said it will do these things, and I'm not going to say I went yeah sure whatever, right? But I think everybody's had a little healthy speculation. I'm sorry, little healthy
investment.
No, they're a little cautious with Bitcoin still. I think people are still in that boat. We're going to bring some new news to it, but. Bitcoin has moved. It's gone up in value, right? If we think about July of last year, I think we were at like let me see if I even put it in the show notes, maybe like a 286 or a 3 something, maybe. And
yeah,
go ahead.
When it was hovering down at 200, it was quite a while down there, and I was a little nervous. I thought it was gonna crater and just be done. That's always in the back of my head. But
yeah,
it made a comeback. So.
Yeah, and so where's it at today? If I were selling or buying Bitcoin, what would be the price today?
About 650.
Oh, well, yeah, that's significantly more. That's like double from what you and I talked about just a year ago. If I had just bought one or two Bitcoins last year, I would have doubled the value in that. And I think it's been a pretty even move from the 300s to the 600s, right? If we think between July of this year to July today, pretty steady growth, or have there been any big moves either way, kind of based on the
No,
market?
it's been pretty steady. I mean, there's just been a lot of global factors and general news filtering in improvements, and nothing really. I mean, the highest it's gotten was like 750 or something at one point, just spiked up a little bit, but so it's settled at 650, which is not a huge difference. But it's the five of the last 6 years. It's been the best performing currency globally, so
Wow.
it's doing all right.
Yeah. Well, for folks who didn't listen to 223, let's get to know you just a little bit. So tell us a little bit about like who you are, your business here in town, how it fits into the Bitcoin infrastructure or ecosystem. Just catch us up a little bit.
Sure. So my company is Alphabitcoin. We've been around for approaching 3 years now, and we have a Bitcoin kiosk, also known as a BTM versus an ATM at Exarban Village, Jones Brothers Cupcakes, and his name is Jonas, but that's really neither here nor there. And he dispenses Bitcoin to people who give him cash. So if you wanted to buy some Bitcoin, as Jim was just mentioning, you can bring $1 in and you can get $1 worth of Bitcoin. You can bring $500 in and get $500 worth of Bitcoin. And then that will be deposited either onto a paper wallet, which I don't have an example of here, but it's a piece of paper with two QR codes, a public and a private key. Or you can also get it on, have it deposited onto your phone or a web wallet, in which case the public key would be scanned to deposit the money, and the private key would then be held by you, secretly, ideally. So.
Yeah, and we talk in depth about that a year ago when we had you on. I don't think the mechanics of Bitcoin have changed in a year, right? I mean, it's still pretty much the same business, right? From that standpoint. So if you're interested in that, I would send you back. Just go to theaverageguy.tv/HGG223. We'll get you there, and you can kind of go back and catch up. We brought you on because we kind of want to know what's new in the Bitcoin space. What do we know today that we didn't know? So we know the price doubled, and before we move on to that, is it going to still continue to just grow, or should it, based on the math? Should it just continue to grow at a pretty steady pace for the next year or two or three? What's that going to? Oh, maybe how that has to do with one of the stories you're going to talk
about. No, I did touch. I might have touched on it 223, but I do think when I spoke at Infotech like 2 years ago or whenever it was that you interviewed me that first time, that I had a linear progression, and that's kind of my prediction that it'll hit. I don't remember what period it was, but I had said it was going to be 15 grand per Bitcoin at a certain time. It might have been the end of mining, but anyway. So I think it's going to be fairly linear, barring anything. I mean, you could always say there's going to be. You start to see a pattern of a high jump, and then it kind of settles down into the middle of that, about halfway up and down. I'm sure there's some algorithmic or algebraic reason for that, but anyways, overall though it's generally gone that path up to where we're at right now.
And if you want to follow, what's the best way? I think you had is it Coinbase? Is that one of the
yeah,
right, one of this, and it's just Coinbase, right? Coinbase.com is a place you can open an account if you wanted to do Bitcoin. You could go out there and open an account. I remember looking. Let's see if I can find the.
Your best place for like charts and stuff like that, if you want to get into that kind of the technical side of things from a trading perspective and such, would be something like a blockchain.info. They've got a pretty extensive charts page where you can look at some of the historical stuff that we're referring to right now.
Blockchain.info.
Yeah.
And it might just help to have that, because I know there was a sweet when we had you on a year ago. I was looking at a sweet annual chart, and so I probably look at they have a currency statistics, and then I'm going to look at the market price in U.S. dollars. So you're right.
Yep.
There is, as I'm looking at since August 15th, a little bit of a dip after we had you on in July. A little bit of a dip, maybe into the 240s, 230 maybe as low. By August, no, by November, spike back up a little bit, then down, and then a little bit up, and then down, a little bit up. So it's kind of moving, but I think if you put a line over it, it would be fairly linear.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at like in January of 14, it was at 136, and then you trace that all the way over to where you were just looking of January, July of 15. I mean, you could draw a line all the way back to day one, essentially, through that kind of transition. So
yeah, I'll show that. So if you're a video watcher or the audio listener, and none of this is making sense, you can head over to the video as well, or head over to blockchain.info and get it. But there's a good look at there's a kind of good look at the chart. Not exact straight line, but definitely Bitcoin is probably one of those things if you're using it for utility. In other words, if you're trading across borders or doing some of those kinds of things, those transactions are happening pretty fast, and probably the market price doesn't matter as much. But if it's a buy and hold, and you're looking at it as maybe a growth investment of some kind, so far, I mean, it still continues to do pretty well from a growth standpoint. And I think you've always said in the couple times I've interviewed you that it'll probably continue to do that just based on the math, right?
Yeah, it's still nerve-wracking, but I've become more confident in buying into the dips, or regardless of the price. And yeah.
Good. And then the BTM at Jones Brothers. We know Jones Brothers here in the Omaha area for pretty good cupcakes.
Yep.
But you've got a BTM there. Does that do pretty well from a usage standpoint? Is it picking up pretty steady? How's that working?
Over the past year alone, we've grown probably almost double transactions, or I should say revenue. But on average, we do about 50 transactions per month. So we do over 10 grand a month as well in gross volume.
Yeah, and so pretty faithful. I imagine the transaction volume comes from some pretty faithful customers.
Well, that, but also CryptoLocker is the other main driver there, where people are showing up. So
people are showing up because they've got ransomware, right? It's on their computer, and people are requiring Bitcoin purchases.
Yep.
Pretty brutal. Do you see those on a transaction by transaction basis, or is that blocked from you being able to see dollar amounts?
I do see dollar amounts, but somebody could be buying $700 because they're infected, or somebody could be buying $700 because they enjoy the currency. So
yeah. So cool. Well, when we think about what's been going on in the last year or so, what you've got a couple stories that I think you can update us on. What's new in the world of Bitcoin, and why should we care about it? I mean, why should we still care about it? I think there's still, Edward, a fairly yawn approach for most people of kind of like, okay, whatever. It was hot for a while. Most people can't mine coins anymore, so it doesn't make any sense, right, to do that. Why should we still be interested in this?
I think it's, the Brexit would be probably the nearest and dearest to my heart in in why we should care about Bitcoin. I mean, they obviously are trying. Britain is obviously trying to flee from a risky engagement that a bunch of countries decided to put themselves into, and you got people like Greece and Italy dragging everybody down, and they would like some sovereignty, and they'd like some stable currency, and I think that's what we all want at the end of the day. And so
how does that affect? And I haven't stayed up with that when we think of Brexit, and I haven't stayed up with that as far as how that fits into Bitcoin. So kind of bridge that gap for me.
Sure. So people are in the midst of the Brexit decision and vote, or in the lead-up especially, people were saying, okay, well, the pound is going to collapse. The pound's going to be really hurt if we decide to do this, and so they did it, and then the pound did collapse, or a little bit. Not too bad. I mean, I think in the greater, just like the market crash of 2008, we're now seeing stock market highs. Like it's like eventually the pound will just be fine, and it was all a bunch of hype. But in the meantime, people are saying it makes people think about what is their money tied into, what drives it, and so they are if these politicians are making decisions and those decisions are impacting the value of their money, whether it's inflation, etc., then they are looking for alternatives or things that they can control, which would be something like Bitcoin, where it's not tied to the political decisions of institutions and government bodies.
So if Bitcoin isn't tied to those, then there's still pretty good swings in it. What kind of things are causing those spikes and dips?
Sure.
Is it a speculative? Is it highly speculative from that standpoint, or what's causing some of those?
I think it's the question of if we can't control it, is that i.e. if there is no Federal Reserve, what are we willing to accept those risks and live with them for a greater good, if you will, or a bigger picture, which would be there is no Fed controlling Bitcoin, which means it is going to float at a free market price, and in the longer run, as we've just kind of outlined, that is not a negative thing. That has been just fine for it for the past 6 or 8 years now. So. Something like Brexit, something like, we saw the same thing when Greece happened. It's just it accentuates what Bitcoin is, which at the end of the day, despite the fact that we just talked about it as a commodity, it is a vehicle to transmit value across the world, regardless of where I am, regardless of where you are. And so I am in Greece, and I am able to take that cash, purchase Bitcoin, and I can then hold my money in Bitcoin, and then someday when I travel to my new job in Scotland or wherever, since that's going to be the new financial hub supposedly. When I travel to Scotland, I can then withdraw that Bitcoin, and I have not lost my money. I've not lost value like the Grecian currency did. So,
although you could lose value if it itself had gone through a cycle of some kind, and Bitcoin has lost value in that process, right? It's not it has its own inherent value.
No, yeah, I'm not I'm giving an example of what drives it, and that being that in an instance where it went up, an instance where it went down is the government issuing a negative opinion about it. That would be a driver of why it would go down. And so to that point, while it is susceptible to, I would say it is not. Okay, so the dollar, if I have a dollar now, tomorrow it's worth 97 cents because of inflation or whatever. It is the utility of Bitcoin does not change over time. It is still a utilitarian means of conveying value, but it is still susceptible to news. It is not susceptible to government control and government decisions.
Yeah. Did it respond to the Brexit?
Yeah.
When that happened, did it go up?
Yeah, that's what you're seeing there.
That spike.
Yeah, at the end of just the past couple of weeks or a couple months or whatever. That is I attribute it largely to Brexit, but nobody really knows. But
right.
Yeah.
From that standpoint. Well, not to get into that too much, but when we think about, we can mention it again. This is eventually the blockchains will be complete. Right. Eventually, everything in the system will have been used up from that standpoint.
I'll stop you there. The rewards, the mining rewards, or the distribution of the currency will be complete in 2140. The currency at that point, I can't see that far into the future, but the currency at that point would be stable, would have reached the perfect equilibrium, if you will, of the amount of money necessary for miners to continue doing their thing, and that will make them continue to secure the network, which will make it be available for people to build code on. So.
Okay, but the mining will be complete, the blockchain will be complete, right? From that standpoint, am I?
Yes, that is yes.
That's too simplistic, probably.
No, that's fine. I just want to differentiate between the rewards that are new Bitcoin that is generated versus the rewards that are generated for mining, which will essentially never stop.
Yeah.
Because that's just cyclical. So.
Right.
Okay.
So, and then 2140 is what you said.
Yes.
So we got a while. I mean, this isn't. We're not like. We're thinking 2140. Most of us are not going to live.
I know. That's crazy.
That long, right?
Yeah.
To be there. So this will just keep. This should, in theory, just keep rolling along. When you think about the work that you do, and most people, what are most people doing with Bitcoin right now? I mean, really, how's it being used? In most cases, we mentioned the ransomware. It has become real popular, right, for people to be able to pay the ransomware folks. But what other ways, or what are you seeing from a popularity standpoint?
You could buy drugs with it.
I was wondering if we were going to go down that path.
Well, but so same with money, right? I mean, that cash, U.S. dollars are still pretty good at that, but it has some advantages from a transactional standpoint when we think about crossing borders and some of those being able to purchase. Not, when we talked to you the last time, you said one of the advantages is I can buy Bitcoin with U.S. dollars and convert those to, let's say, the pound, and I'm not paying those transactional fees across those banks, right? Yep. Is that gaining in popularity, or more people using it for that kind of transaction, or is that kind of steadied out?
So since we'll bring this up, or since this was one of the things I was wanting to touch on, the idea that we've seen a lot of over the past year, there's been a lot of different, which we touched on last time, I think, a little bit, with all these altcoins out there. People are building new blockchains, building new coins that are either have a specific purpose or a specific advantage, or they do something a little bit different, whether they're faster or they're more anonymous than Bitcoin. So I would say that the Bitcoin is, at the end of the day, I think Bitcoin will ultimately be more of an API and more of a back-end way of, again, building code upon something. It will not necessarily be the front end, what the user actually directly interfaces with. And so to them, it would be fairly transparent whether the application is using Bitcoin on the back end to pass money across borders, versus if they wanted to do something that was truly anonymous, it would take a little bit more of a technical know-how. Not to say that cartels don't have that by any means, but then they would probably, there are other coins out there or other services out there that would be better used or used in conjunction with Bitcoin. So as a standalone, while people use it now because it is the best, I think, and if you want to remain anonymous, there are other options out there.
So do you see like any, because it's funny, when I talk to anyone at school or just have conversations about Bitcoin, a lot of them revolve around like, oh, I wish I would have bought some then because the price has doubled. And it's almost as like an investment sort of thing instead of an actual use of Bitcoin to do transactions. When you guys are looking at use cases for Bitcoin, are people looking at it as an investment, or are people looking at it as, hey, I need this to use online or actually use in purchases, I guess?
For the most part, there are there are a few people that come. I'll say the people that are attend the Bitcoin meetups here in Omaha. Those are more along the lines of the folks that would buy and hold.
Right.
The people that use the kiosk are the people that use it for transaction purposes.
Okay.
And then you've got this whole other group of people, which are the folks that have TD Ameritrade accounts and Charles Schwab accounts, and I would say they are the ones buying the ETFs that are tied to the Bitcoin price, and so they're not even in Bitcoin, but they are benefiting from or susceptible to the volatility and the price rises. So those are the three. I think I haven't really given it much thought, but those are the three main categories of people I would put out there that I run into on a regular basis.
Interesting.
Edward, has there been any high profile, or when we think about, it's supposed to be a secure way of doing it, can it, have people figured out how to game it? Can it be hacked? Is it hackable?
So again, speaking of altcoins, because Bitcoin itself, the answer is no. There are obviously companies. There are regularly companies that practice just poor security protocols, whether that's Bitcoin related or any other thing, as you're well aware. And so and so while there are companies that have been hacked that are in the Bitcoin industry, it's not necessarily because of Bitcoin. That being said, going back to the whole altcoin conversation, Ethereum is one of the biggest. It's one of the biggest market. By market cap, it's one of the biggest altcoins out there, and it really is. I mean, their goals were good, their ambitions were good. I had high hopes for it. It was finally going to be resolve some of the. It had a little more of a mainstream feel to it. It wasn't so like it didn't have all the baggage associated with it that the Bitcoin name had associated with it. IBM was working with Ethereum, stuff like that. So I was hopeful, and then they released their large decentralized anonymous organization, the DAO, or DAO, and the DAO was this big, basically this big nebulous cloud computer or coin that would allow you to code or vote on a large scale across the globe, and so those they offered this IPO, which everybody could invest into the DAO, and then they raised $150 million. You may have seen some news about it, and then because of the way it was coded by the folks that released it, somebody got in there, exploited it, and absconded it with $50 million of the $150 million that they had raised for their IPO. So. So yes, those things happen, but not to Bitcoin. At least not recently, I should say. It's not. It just hasn't. I mean, there are. I can give you some micro instances years and years and years ago, but that's not what we're talking about. So those things do happen. Sadly, they had to make the decision to. So if you're, if you're in the software world or programming at all, they wound up doing, or what I think they're going to do is essentially a hard fork. So they're going to basically redo the algorithms or redo the software and the coding behind their coin and behind the DAO in order to recover or make everybody whole that invested their $150 million in, and at the same time lock out or push out the hacker, and his $50 million is now useless. So
I gotcha. So like a re-engineering of the system that's not in the hacker's favor.
Yes, and it's disappointing. I mean, not only just because it was an interesting idea, but I think the hard fork is the wrong decision, and not everybody agrees with me on that, obviously. But it shows the human desire for avoid the hard consequences, even at the risk of things like. The ability to make a decision and just stick with it, like now the leadership saying we want our money back instead of saying our coin is still the best out there. So
right,
yeah,
it does kind of it does give the concept a bloody nose, when you hear about these things and you're like, wait a minute, they stole a third of what you just raised, and I'm assuming from the story that when they stole a third, it just stayed in Bitcoin. I mean, it just stayed in the coin itself. They didn't actually withdraw that in hard dollars, did they?
So they would have likely, if this hard fork wasn't occurring, which I still don't even know for sure it is, but if the hard fork wasn't occurring, then they would have had, there was like a 30-day window where the way the code was written, you just couldn't do anything with your money in those 30 days. So at the end of the 30 days, he would have had the Ethereum available to him, at which point he probably would have switched that over to Bitcoin, converted it to Bitcoin, and then he could have eventually gotten it into hard dollars. You would have to do it in small chunks, obviously, but that would have been likely what he had done if he did want U.S. dollars.
It does sound a little bit like the plot of a James Bond movie. I'm not gonna lie, right? It's got that Ethereum, the name Ethereum, and nodes and a hard fork, and hackers and attackers, and no, we're gonna shut this down. And it's a 30-day window to write the code within 30 days. Do you think does an event like this kind of set have a setback for Bitcoin?
I think the fact that it was the first organization that was not, it was the first, I think it has a positive impact. I'll put the positive spin on it first, but yes, I think it has a negative impact from Bitcoin. But I think the positive spin is it was the first AI corporation to ever raise that much money. Like that is if you think about like, you talk about people putting their lives in the hands of robots. Like that was the first time they had ever tried it essentially in that large of a scale, and they pulled it off. They raised $150 million. I mean, you gotta. I don't know why we haven't gone back to the moon yet after 30 years, but I think you've got to do something to get off. Go. And I think that was a valiant first effort, and they really did a good job despite what actually happened later. So.
Yeah. So in the article that we'll put the link in the show notes. It says the aftermath. It says it seems at this point that the DAO will die, and that DAO token holders will get somewhere between 0 and 100% of their ether back, right? Which is, that sentence by itself. It's like, okay, Captain Obvious. I mean, that's not being very risky. Yeah, you're going to get somewhere between 0 and all of it back. Well, geez. So there's still, but that tells me, as there's still, at least at the time of this writing, there's still a lot of uncertainty about exactly what's going to happen, right?
But again, it goes to which highlights another feature, and it's something that hasn't been done before. And it's like we talk about these things just like they're happening in the shadows, I guess. And you think about it, and someday these won't be just amazing firsts for mankind, essentially. I mean, we're talking about firsts for mankind in all these aspects, and everybody's kind of like, yeah, Bitcoin, yeah, maybe that'll be popular someday. But so that being said, like the way the DAO, the hard fork versus soft fork is happening, and the way which the way this will transition us into talking about the different Bitcoin versions. But anyways, the way the hard fork versus soft fork is happening is people who've never met each other before, or they're spread all over the world, are voting using their coins. And so even the fact that they're able to make a decision with that type of user base is amazing. Like we can't get most of the United States to vote, and they've got like all these Ethereum users who are saying yes, I want a hard fork, or no, I want a hard fork, and they're able to count those votes without question of the integrity. We question the integrity of voting in the U.S., and these people are voting with no question of is this a legit decision or not. So. But that's the same way that you'll hear also talked about Bitcoin Core versus Bitcoin Classic, and the same thing is happening there as people are using their servers, their mining machines essentially. I might be oversimplifying it, but they're using their servers and their wallets to vote on what version, what type, the core. What version of the software they're going to use. So I'll say that's all I'll say. So there's Bitcoin Core, which has been around for 8 years or however long now, and there's Bitcoin Classic. And the main issue was, I think this might have been happening last time, even though we talked. It's been going on for a long time. The main question is how big is a block? Which is, when you're mining, you've got block size limitation of 1 megabyte because people talk about did Satoshi write that in on purpose for security purposes or decentralization, or did he write it because he was short-sighted and didn't know that someday we'd have faster computers and stuff like that. So Bitcoin Classic was an attempt to raise the block size, and so I think that there are Bitcoin people like myself are referred to as Bitcoin maximalists or absolutists, and that being that the core should never change. Like it's always going to be the core, and the core devs are the people that fix it and decide the release paths and stuff like that. So Classic had made an attempt to kind of hijack the whole infrastructure, and again, the way people vote on that is by using their computers, and again, that's done globally by people who don't know each other. They just have a stake in the system. So
it's interesting when you say that, because when you add some financial accountability to the voting piece, it kind of changes the stakes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think here in the United States we have a terrible voting problem, right? And we're supposed to be the land of democracy and blah blah blah. We vote. We're terrible voters, right? I mean, I think in the last probably 30 to 50 years, we just don't turn out for general elections or for anything for the most part. And yet, I wonder if there were more. And there's a lot at stake during an election, and yet people just won't do it. We've got one coming up here in November, which will be kind of interesting to say the least. I think it's going to see record lows, right? I mean, it's going to be crazy. But when we think about the blockchain, is besides transaction from a money standpoint, from a value standpoint, are there other ways? You talk about this voting, but are there other ways for the blockchain to be useful beyond just beyond value from that standpoint?
Yeah, I think when you focus on, like I was talking to somebody about doing a project in Africa, and when you start to focus on more about the concept of we automatically go from the idea of trust. I think just mentally, or the way we're programmed, is we go to dollars, we go to money, because that's what usually people are talking about Bitcoin because of the price and stuff. But I think when you start to just focus on the trust part of that, I think the main purpose of Bitcoin is to allow us to work with somebody in a tribe or whatever, or somebody that we've never met before in Africa, and give them tools or give them money and give them something of value, and we trust that they've received it, and so then that's where I think that the main, you talk about, again, somewhere like I'll use Greece as another example. If they're in dire straits, there's just a higher probability that they might abscond, or they might cipher off a little bit of the money as it makes its way through the country to the person you intended to send it to. So I think, again, going back to this idea of trust, that you're trusting that Bitcoin will be the means to get the money there into the hands that you intended.
Yeah, and all of it there.
Yes.
Right. And not just bits and pieces of it, but all of it there. It can't
Yes.
be shaved off, right? You can't in transit, you can't shave off bits of it.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, from that standpoint. Yes. Other Jim in the chat room says, when we were talking about the voting piece, he says, yeah, but rich early investors can vote to go in a direction that helps them, then sell before the consequences hit. Is that when we? Because the more Bitcoin you have, the more of a vote you have?
No, not necessarily. No, so now you kind of touched on the idea of proof of stake versus proof of work. Who the main folks that are actually voting on Bitcoin and which way to do it, would be the miners. And so there's a video by Andreas Antonopoulos, if you really want to dive into that topic, that talks about I could try to find it for you, but it's the 5 parties that are all held accountable and all held in checks and balances between each other in the Bitcoin ecosystem. So if the miners choose something, if they choose the wrong thing, they're going to alienate a large user base, a large percentage of the user base. And so even if it might, they might have an opinion, but whether they execute on that to actually make any changes, like stasis, like this idea of equilibrium again, is the perfect spot for Bitcoin to not have any changes, because then it just can operate as it's meant to be. When you start making changes, you start to risk that, and then if the price goes up or down, that impacts the miners negatively, because they don't make as much money anymore, because people are going to use it as much, because they're going to get ticked or get out or whatever. So while the large owners were great, obviously hugely benefited by their early entry into the system, there was a lot of reward there, and that does decrease the total amount in circulation for everybody else at this point. I don't think at some point, I think those wallets will start to loosen up, and that money will work its way into the system somehow, I think. So.
Yeah. So the consumer decides to not trust, so the miners make a decision. It's not in favor of the consumer. The consumers decide not to trust it and pull out. That lack of demand drives the price down. Now the miners are no longer getting the value that they once were, right? That's how you're implying. So if there was a mass exodus, so to speak, or a run on Bitcoin, that run would cause the price to drop in the market.
So if people are getting out, they're going to sell their Bitcoin. I'm willing to take 644, 645 instead of my 650, and yes, you eventually see this drop.
It would see it from that standpoint, it would follow kind of a standard market pressures that when you have more sellers than buyers, the price is going to drop down and is going to be affected. So yeah, so that does bring some kind of accountability into it. It's a big system, so it's hard for sometimes that accountability, I imagine, is worked out over weeks or months as opposed to days. In some of that, and they're like, "Ooh, we made a bad decision." Like, we're gonna have to loosen back up again or whatever, right?
There's been a lot around, especially around the concept of core versus classic. There's been a lot of meetings that didn't occur before with the major players, such as the miners, such as the programmers, that are trying to work this out. I mean, it's been again, it's like anything as far as the benefits have been. There have been great benefits, even though it's been a painful debate and people have been kind of gotten upset and gotten mad at each other and stuff. But in the end, overall it's been a positive for the community, I think.
Yeah. Who remind me, who are the miners? It used to be anybody could be a miner, but now the energy to create a Bitcoin is not worth the value of it, right? Today, I'm assuming that's still true. It gets more complicated and takes more physical energy to produce Bitcoin today. The farther you go in the chain, that gets even more and more taxing. So who is mining? Where is that world and how does it exist?
Yeah, so that is probably one of my greatest concerns as far as if I had any nagging questions, would be the fact that the large concentration of miners in China is probably one of my biggest concerns. But there are so yes, to your point, there's mainly large warehouses that have huge fans, great ventilation, and beds for the workers who are there 24/7, basically babysitting these servers. And when they have crazy infrastructure that if a server goes offline, they go pull it off the shelf and replace the fan and put it back up there, type thing. It's an amazing feat of engineering there's actually more. I want to say 5 or 7 or something like that. There's more computing power in the blockchain that's like 5 times Google or something like that. It's something crazy as far as
so more power to create the blockchain or to
secure it.
Secure it, right? Because it's creating these security. These numbers ultimately come down to encryption, which allows that to be decrypted and all those pieces. But it's taking so much effort now to get that done. So are you telling me it's working in China because of economies of scale from a technology standpoint, or because the power is free? How is that from an economy standpoint? How does that work?
So it is working in China because they were some of the largely because of their development of our ability to manufacture the silicon and develop the chips that are used nowadays in mining. When they were coming off the assembly line, they went right into the hands of the Chinese nationals there, and they went over and popped them in their warehouses and started mining. It would have been great if we here in the United States could have gotten a few more of those, but that did not happen. So they have that's one of their advantages. And then yes, the fact that I can basically shave some of the shielding off of the line outside my house and connect my electrical circuit to the pole. That is another one of the beauties of unregulated economies like theirs, or unregulated infrastructures like theirs.
If I wanted to mine today, would I need a special chip to do it? In other words,
those are the ASICs. You'd still need an ASIC, which is a specific integrated circuit, something application-specific integrated circuit. Yeah.
And are they making those, or has everyone that has been made and
No, they do. Again, the shelf life. I mean, there's not. They make some in the U.S., but the manufacturers have greatly consolidated, which would be another kind of story from the past year. Is a lot of consolidation, mergers and acquisitions amongst in the Bitcoin world. The company that built the first, really the first most successful ASIC and started that whole development cycle, really was they were just actually acquired by a public company in China, so they're actually on the stock exchange now. And then you've got companies, or the Winklevoss twins of Facebook fame. They have their ETF, which is actually launching on the BATS trading platform, which is out of Kansas City. So that's kind of a little hometown or a Midwest success story there of bringing those guys into the Great Plains. So
yeah, I'm sure Ryan's all over that with the Silicon Prairie News. But all right, so that kind of makes sense to me. So when we think about miners, those are the ones physically doing it. But are the chip manufacturers a subset of that economy, since they're providing the equipment to it, or they get lumped in with the miners?
I would lump them in with the miners.
Okay.
They don't care what they just want to get paid for the chip.
Right. So they're creating the chip in its process out of the die. It gets shipped to whoever's going to buy it. I'm assuming there's I'm assuming there's a market for these chips as well.
Oh,
and
yeah.
that price probably continues to go up and fluctuate, right?
Yeah. So you got I want to say Moore's law. I don't know if I can't. Whatever the law is, where things get faster over time, and so the shelf life. That's why it's so important that when it comes off the line, it gets put into a rack as quickly as possible, because it's got a finite shelf life before it becomes not profitable to mine anymore. Other areas of mining is also like Greenland, because they've got cold temperatures, and so they have efficient mining operations there, because they can regulate the temperature a lot easier. So, and miners are different than. I won't be able to go into too technical of an explanation, but there's miners, and then there's nodes, and nodes again are another one of those. I think they're on his list of 5 parties that are involved, and nodes are kind of feeding the transactions to the miners, and so I guess what would be more concerning, I should say, would be is if there was a high concentration of nodes somewhere. Nodes are actually and I should get to that link, but anyways, nodes are actually are fairly well spread out across the United States and across the world as a whole, and so those are one of the parties that are coming in checking the miners, basically. So when they bring something in, the miners are doing the math on the back end, and then they've got to send everything back out to the nodes, essentially, to say everything's good, here's the latest version, let's keep plugging away. And so that's kind of if the nodes were concentrated in China, that would be a big issue, because then you've got the miners and the nodes next to each other, and they could be in cahoots. So.
Got it.
But anybody can run a node. There was a company, 21.co, I believe is their website. They released, so 21.co released a tiny Bitcoin node. And you're able to, it's basically Linux running the Bitcoin wallet, but you're able to, it makes it a lot more accessible for people to go buy this device, plug it in, just basically like a Raspberry Pi. You could plug in 20 of them in your house. They're all running, they connect to the wireless or whatever. They're all running, all these nodes are now running in your house. Well, the other thing about that is they're gathering dust, if you will, or they're able to transact easier. So at some point you can turn on some functionality that makes it a wallet, and you can then become we'll say if you were, and then the next step would be running like a web server, essentially, or you actually run an application that the public could access, and you could basically, people would pay you to use your application that you built using the Bitcoin protocol. So that was fairly large, because that was Andreessen Horowitz, one of the largest venture capital firms in California, launched 21, and they're on sale at Amazon. And so it's an easy way to add another node to the network for the good of everybody, and to start dabbling with Bitcoin and doing microtransactions and whatnot.
And how much are those nodes? If I were to go to buy one, what's the?
I want to say like $400.
Oh, really? That's pretty expensive.
It is, yeah. So there's this whole there were a lot of memes and stuff about how it was like just this giant racket. Like people were it was like Nike shoes. Why are Nike shoes $300? Because they're Nike. Like there's no added value to the fact that you now have Nike shoes. Like you might as well just run in the Bitcoin wallet on your Linux computer, and you'd have the exact same thing that they're selling you $400 for. So it was just basically a Raspberry Pi with a brand on it. But anyway, so yes, I think that's the way things are going, and I think even if they didn't sell out, if they didn't sell a whole bunch of them, I think what it did was allowed them to say, ultimately it allows them to say, what else can we pre-install Bitcoin on? And then you start to talk about the Internet of Things and the ability of, if my cell phone, I don't care if my cell phone has an IP address anymore. I care about, does it have a wallet address? And so when I'm with you we're sitting next to each other, if Bitcoin's pre-installed, I've got a wallet, I can send you money using NFC or Bluetooth without having to say, do you have a wallet? What phone do you have? Blah, blah. We can transact because that device came with Bitcoin out of the box. And I think that's the longer play of like where everything will have a wallet on it eventually, just like everything has an IP address right now.
Yeah. Mike, when you think about this, where you're at in life, right? Getting ready to buy a house, getting ready to have some kids. You weren't here the last time we talked about this. You get like what do you think about when you think about Bitcoin? I mean, does this entice you to say I want to find out more about this or not?
It's always just been that intriguing topic to me and the intriguing thing that I like to hear people talk about. And that's why so I've just been sitting here just listening because I like just hearing about it. It's fun to talk about. But as far as actually putting my money where the mouth is and actually doing something about it, going and buying Bitcoin, I don't think so. Just because as of right now, like I was telling him, for me it would be more of an investment thing, and I just don't know enough about it to be really, when you invest in something, you really got to know the ins and outs, and I would have to do a lot more research into it before I felt comfortable investing in it. And beyond the investing side of things, not too many use cases for me as far as transactions or anything like that where I would ever use Bitcoin. But the use case of when you're moving countries, that's extremely interesting to me. You think of it using as an intermediary to kind of go, hey, put it in Bitcoin, then grab it back out, in a different country and stuff like that. That, to me, if I was ever in that situation, would actually be useful. But as far as right now, no, I can't find myself having a good use case for it. But I don't know. It's a little too cautious, maybe. Maybe I'm a little more cautious than the average person, or maybe I'm right there with the average person. I don't know.
Yeah, Edward, I think it's still not a great average guy thing. I mean, I love talking about it here, and that's why I keep bringing you back on about once a year to kind of get an update on it. I still think a lot of people get confused by it. I find every time we talk about it, to me it's terribly fascinating. I mean, I love the science behind it. I love the math behind it. I love what they're trying to do. I love this open source security idea where it's like we're all the chain keeps everybody in check, and I love everything. It's a great idea. I just sometimes I wonder, like, will this ever be a mainstream solution for some things? It's not, some people think, well, it's supposed to replace world currency. No, I don't. I think we talked about that the last time. But do you see in the next couple of years it being more mainstream than it is today? Or is it always going to be really niche-y?
I think the problem is that we are that we're always going to be competing against the dollar, and so I think that whether it's a generational thing that after you and I are gone, that it won't matter to the next generation whether it's Bitcoin versus dollar. I think to some degree, to your point, is this kind of utopian idea of, is this really the thing we've all been waiting for, the thing we've all been thinking about and dreaming about, and that doesn't, like, I caught the bug early, that is what it is. And so then I think that as time goes on and even into the next generation, then you start to say, well, oh yeah, it is here to stay. Oh yes, we don't care about having our money in dollars anymore, because even the stuff that's going on recently, even with Brexit and stuff like that, like, we didn't see the crazy swings. We saw some swing, but we didn't see the crazy swing. Like, the price is less volatile than it was, in my opinion. in general, I think. And so anyway, so I think that while people are still think the dollar is a safe and stable currency, then yeah, Bitcoin will continually be challenged. I start to think about what happens, some of the world events though, going back to world events, like what happens if type scenarios where will that matter in 100 years? I don't, whether the dollar still is around or not, and then what is going to be there to fill that void. I think just as we just have a tendency to be focused on our toes and more of a microscopic view than what's going to happen in 100 years or 200 years, and assuming it's a little bit, we by default just presume that the dollar is still going to be what the dollar is then, but the reality is that there is a possibility where that's not the case, and then you got to ask yourself what is going to be in that void. It's either going to be a one world currency, which you touched on. I didn't say, but one world currency.
I said it.
I don't even. Anyways, I don't care because I'm going to be in Bitcoin, so I don't care about your one world currency. But it's either going to be those are the alternatives I see, but it doesn't affect us now, and so yeah, I think that there are certainly it's not going to be going viral anytime soon. Yeah.
Yeah, I think as we talk about this, and I think I come to this conclusion every single time we talk about it, is that I don't think it's a bad diversification strategy from. Like last time we talked, I opened an account and I haven't done anything with it, but I should use it in a way that I'm funding it, whether that's I'm just going down and putting $25 in and getting partial Bitcoins or whatever, but or I'm using it as this idea of using it as an investment vehicle is probably wrong, but a savings vehicle, yes. In the sense that if I'm taking the money and I'm putting it in a place to save it, I think that would be to be honest with you, way more than a bank account. Like, I mean, your savings account, 0.25% interest. Like that, there's nothing on it. And yeah, you could lose or gain. I mean, you could lose with Bitcoin, but it would be for me. For a savings account that I'd be saving, for whatever, right, emergency or whatever. I know I can get money back out of it today. I can go in and deposit money at the BTM at Jones Brothers if I needed to get it, and I wouldn't use it for things where I'd have to have that money that day, but it could be the next day I need to go down and withdraw cash. I can get cash out of the BTM, and so that may be, and that would keep me kind of interested in at least watching it from from that standpoint. If you're financially interested in it, kind of brings that. $1,000, $2,000 in their emergency. Maybe that's where your emergency savings lives.
When I think of savings, though, I think of like safety, as in like this savings goes into my savings account where it's backed by the federal government. We talked about that whole thing with dollars.
I know, but dude, it's $1,000.
Well, I know, but okay. Well, hey, to me, that's money right now. I'll take it. If you're throwing it out there, I'll take your $1,000, Jim, and I'll hold on to it for you. Don't worry, I'll be your.
I'm just flinging money at you.
But I would have to consider an investment in my mind, because an investment for me is volatile. It can go up, it can go down. It's something that you can't guarantee for. So I would never be able to consider it savings, because savings to me.
Fair enough. It's
needs
words.
to be more concrete.
It's just words.
Right.
If you had a Bitcoin wallet, he actually could send you $1,000 right now.
Oh man. If only I had it set up.
And I would,
but I think,
if I had $1,000 in a Bitcoin account to be able to do it to you.
Right.
But I think it is. I think you're on the right track, though. So there's two things, again, going back to commodity versus currency, and that's part of what causes confusion. I get that. It has trouble with people wrapping their heads around it. But the reality is, while people are building apps on it all day long and using it for really cool things that you would never know were written on the blockchain, because all you're doing is dealing with the user interface. At the same time, people are also using it because people are always, the misconception is I'm going to lose all my money, or I'm going to lose a lot of money if I invest in Bitcoin. But the reality is, like you just described, I think is ideal for the typical user, where you're putting $25 a week in, $25 a month in, because the reality is, if it's $650 today, even if it goes up to $800, the worst it could do would be go back down to $650. And so while you lost money from $800 to $650, you've already been up ahead. And so people are, it's like this idea of what they don't look on the other side is that there's a great reward, or at least there's an upside to it. That as you mentioned, your FDIC $250,000 insurance policy on your bank account, that is some people would consider that not a great hedge right now either.
Right, that's true.
Yeah.
That's
well,
true.
And I put my money in the stock market. I don't even blink, and yet that is the most volatile index in the world. I mean, it moves around. When we think about both national and international funds, everybody's comfortable with that. Those aren't insured funds.
Have you seen Wolf of Wall Street? I mean,
exactly, taping money to yourself. Well, it's Edward. It's interesting. For me again. It's one of those things. I think it's worth. Now we have a great infrastructure because we have your BTM at Jones Brothers, and that's really close.
Yep.
I mean, the three of us. What's cool about tonight is we're all in the Omaha area, so it's an all Omaha podcast. Not everybody has. Do you know? Are there other ATM or BTM devices in other cities? Are there cities that are supporting this, and not cities, but Kansas City? Are they available down there? Can I do? I'm out in California this week. Can I find BTMs in LA? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's worldwide. There's about 600. What I've experienced is there are different. They're not obviously all related, and so what you run into is problems where you find a BTM but it's not working or something like that, and so I would not rely on a BTM to go get cash if you were going to Los Angeles and hoping to get some cash. But yes, with 600 on the world, there are certainly some, and the nearest one to us would be Kansas City. Yeah, after Nebraska, after Omaha, the next one would be Kansas City. But so there's a fairly good spread, but I think that's going to become more and more common just with the growth of the industry. So
yeah, well, whether you call it an investment or whether you call it savings, I think from a diversification standpoint, I don't think it's a bad idea to drop some of your value into this technology. And it's one of those kinds of things. If I had done that last year when we were talking, my money would be worth exactly twice what it was a year ago. I can't argue with that.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the facts. It's 300 and something. You can go back to that podcast. It was right at the low 300s or below it or something. 287. I can't remember. We talked about it twice. Maybe it was closer to that before and in the threes. But anyways, fact of the matter is 6 something today. That's interesting over the course of a year. By the way, that trend has been pretty consistent over the last 3 or 4 years. Well, that's it's interesting that and Bitcoin is also affected by less factors than we see in the U.S. stock market, right? So, when Brexit happened, we had a massive correction. Now it came back, right? We're fine today. So there was this dip, but Bitcoin didn't have that dip, that Brexit dip. I mean, it did react in some way. In fact, if anything, it probably went up instead of going down during the Brexit thing. That would have been a smart place to be. So I guess my point is, I certainly wouldn't make it a savings account, so to speak. Maybe whatever. But for me, it may be worthy, or it might be for a guy like me, it might be a good investment to drop $25 to $50 a month, to head over, buy some Bitcoin or whatever, set up automatic, whatever, right? From that standpoint, and make that a part of my diversified portfolio from a financial standpoint, right? Where it becomes a piece of what I'm doing. I invest in things way riskier than this, and I don't even blink at it. So
and I'm not trying to beat you up, Mike, but I'll add this: if things transpire to the point that you're hoping the FDIC will give you $250,000, you're probably, if it's that bad, you're probably better off in Bitcoin than you are having your 1% savings account or 0.25% savings account.
And that's a completely fair point. No, and that is a
yeah. You have to remember, this is a U.S. government that has, November's coming.
Yeah, right.
Going to be in charge.
Maybe now is a good time to just throw it all in Bitcoin. Of all the times, maybe this is a very great time to just, just cashing out.
Yeah. Well,
see you later, First National Bank. I'm heading over to Bitcoin. I think with a cashier's check for all of my accounts money.
I think it's interesting if we view it as a tool. Yeah. And it's a different kind of tool, right? In a savings account at a bank is one kind of tool, right? And I know I can get to that money and have great access to it. And so far with U.S. history, I'm always going to have good access to it.
Yeah. Yeah, and anybody can write in PHP or Go or JavaScript, but if you're dealing with somebody across the borders, they could be bad coders or malicious coders, and so we haven't run into anything like this before, where we know that it is what it says it is, regardless of who you're dealing with. Like that is a new and unique thing that we just don't have any basis for previously.
And all of that, the back end of it is the extremely interesting part to me. If anything, all of that back end stuff is what I think has kept Bitcoin alive and keeps popping up in the normal everyday news. Is I think that back end just being so intriguing that's really what is not keeping it alive, but that's what in the normal public eye, it's keeping it kind of on the horizon there.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think, one last question, do you think Rennie puts in chat, buy gold, not Bitcoin? Gold is susceptible to highly speculative swings. It also has a path where it's worth more today than it's ever been worth, and it hasn't really had a major correction. I mean, it's moved up and down, but we have not seen. I mean, gold is apparently not one of those things that's ever going to go out of value from that standpoint. You could buy gold funds. Most people today are not going to purchase gold physically. Like that's crazy, by the way. That is pure craziness if you're buying gold and keeping it at your house from that standpoint. But do you think that Bitcoin could be susceptible to highly speculative markets if it got more popular?
Well, you said a few things there, and can I start with saying, if you don't have to answer this, do you own any gold?
Not from an investment standpoint, no.
Okay, all right. So the people
I think gold and things I bought that I wear.
Right.
But I don't like. I'm gonna hawk. This is my savings account. Like I don't think of gold that way.
He's got his grills that he wears in his teeth on the
weekend.
I guess. Besides that, we're all good.
Yeah.
So I think people that I think people that who own gold would I guess as much, because I think people that own it probably describe it a little bit different, because it has gotten beat up, and there's all this talk about manipulation of the price and stuff like that. I think that there's since we're talking about one world currencies, I think there's this gold would be beneficial, like if you are a conspiracy theorist and you're thinking like EMP or something like that, like there is holding gold, the real thing, and it would be legit or have a use, I guess. But so would wine, and so would liquor as well. But so I think the advantage of, if you're not buying it in bricks, then you are, or actual bullion, then you are trusting somebody. You're trusting in a financial institution that has your gold in a safe somewhere, which does you absolutely no good if something happens, that is a global impact. And so buying gold does not do you much good unless you're holding it yourself. If you're holding it yourself, you're probably doing it because you think there's something that's going to take out our technology infrastructure. And if you don't think something's going to take out our technology infrastructure, then you're better off in Bitcoin, I think, because Bitcoin actually has true utilitarian value, whereas gold has nothing except shiny and heavy. And so I think then you're talking about Bitcoin being a little bit of a safer play than gold. I would personally probably buy a little bit of both, but that's whatever.
That's being diversified, right? I mean, that's at the end of the day, and we're not a financial show. But that being said, I mean, most of us, I mean, our demographic is 35, 55 white male, right? We're the ones making these decisions in the circles that we run. And by the way, if I just excluded you from our main demographic, I'm sorry. I just know my listeners for most people. Well, Mike, you're pretty close.
Yeah,
you're pretty close to that.
Getting there.
But Edward, that what you just described there is great diversification by both, and that's one of those kinds of things as you think about the things you own and the value that you have to them, and whatever your future investments are. When we think about storing that value, because that's what we're doing, right? We're storing value. It's like the calories that I store in my body every day, and I keep storing more and more than I should. But that's what I'm doing. I'm storing value for the future, and I'm trying to hedge those risks that I'm taking, and you probably should be in both. I just to come back to make it full circle, I think Bitcoin now at this point in time is one of those serious markets to consider and to be in, because I don't think it's going anywhere. It's been around long enough now that I don't think this is this isn't the 8 or 10 years ago when it was crazy and everybody was generating their own Bitcoins and whatever. We talked about that in the last time we had you on. But I do think there's a diversity angle here to this. And it's probably smart to, again, I won't pay attention to it unless I'm invested in it. And it may be smart for me to make some kind of financial investment on a regular basis to just pay attention to it.
I think the one thing we're also missing here is that, and we're wondering why it's kind of just floundering still after 8 years. And you mentioned it. I think the one of the big missing pieces is and this is obviously what some people would say qualifies as money, period, is the ability to pay government institutions and pay your taxes with it. And I think that will be a key driver in when I am a 40-year-old husband and father, and I'm able to not only, it does me no good to go buy a cupcake with it, it does me all sorts of good to click a button and all of a sudden the state government has the money they're desperately wanting, and I can get them off my back. That is a real need for everybody, and that I think is going to be a key driver in adoption, and you're seeing that in states like North Carolina would be and even I'd say maybe Texas too would be another one. You're seeing those governments looking at Bitcoin and blockchain and its uses, and I think ultimately that's going to wind up being them and accepting it as a way of paying off your government debt.
Yeah, I mean, we laughed at PayPal, right? And now PayPal keeps showing up in all these places that you're like, seriously, I can get a McDonald's hamburger with PayPal.
Yeah.
And so, it struggles with some of even our payment systems off of our phones that they're not accepted everywhere. It's going to take time for those things to get into the system. So, well, a good discussion nonetheless, and not your typical home gadget geeks. But like I said, it's my show, so I can do anything I want. I hope if you, the listener, who is out there, and we had some great conversation in the chat room. By the way, I love the sparring back and forth and just the challenge that takes place. This is, if we all just become lemmings and just do what everybody says and don't question this stuff, that's worthless. I mean, I think it's super smart to have. One of the things I appreciate about my audience, and this, especially the chat room that's out there, is people are super skeptical about this kind of stuff, and I like that. Bring it on, because that keeps it accountable. And hey, I'm not all in. Like, I haven't even bought Bitcoin yet. I have an account. I haven't bought any yet. Maybe it's time. Maybe it's time for the next one. Edward, hang around a little bit here. We'll do a little bit of post show. We won't do much post show tonight because I got to get this show processing and going, and because I need to get it produced yet tonight because I'll be out for the weekend. So with that, hang tight for me 1 sec. I'll remind everybody that if you haven't taken advantage of the Patreon link that we have, I put one out there if you're interested in supporting the show. Maybe hold off for a second. We'll put a $1 entry out there. So if you ever want to try Patreon out, you can. Great way of supporting the show. Head over to theaverageguy.tv/support. And again, do it or don't do it. Just some people wanted to, so we made that available to you. That's it. Maybe I should make that available in Bitcoin.
Oh, hey.
Yeah.
There we go. Maybe if no, just kidding. You don't forget, you can contact the show via email, jim@theaverageguy.tv, and many of you do that as well. Track me on Twitter @jcollison. Don't forget that the AverageGuy.tv platform, both web and media hosting, powered by Maple Grove Partners, gets secure, reliable, high-speed hosting from people you know and trust, and that's Christian, of course. Get more information and plans that start as little as $10 a month. Maple Grove Partners, man, 10 Bitcoin.
I was just going to say, that'd be a really expensive service.
Wow, that's serious. That's seriously expensive hosting. MapleGrovePartners.com. We'll thank Roger out at WLMN Radio, and they broadcast us live on terrestrial radio out there. Roger, thanks for doing that in Grafton, West Virginia. Don't forget, you can download the app as well. We mentioned that at the top of the show. Go to HomeGadgetGeeks.com. We'll thank LastPass for their sponsorship of that app, and it's available out there for you for free if you want to download it. If you're using the Amazon or affiliate link, don't forget that's theaverageguy.tv/Amazon. And seems like a slow summer from the numbers I've been watching lately, although I haven't seen the awesome Prime Day numbers that are come across Mike yet, but I'm not too sure so many in my audience did Prime Day. But it is out there if you want to. If you're going to shop at Amazon, just start at theaverageguy.tv/Amazon. Of course, we make a little bit off of that, and that helps us do things like we did today with our friends over at Kangaroo in Focus. And when we talk about that equipment, we're able to purchase that and be able to get those tested. And for you, if you're into this Pokemon Go thing that's going on, Emily over at Classy Little Podcast wrote us a really nice little gadget article that's available for you. 5 gadgets that'll help you do Pokemon Go. I know, again, this is not my audience, but it is some of you. Mike, you've been out doing some hunting, right?
Yeah, I spent more time than I probably should.
Edward, are you doing any Pokemon Go?
No, not at all. No. I did Ingress. I enjoyed Ingress for a while, and
that's all it is. It's Ingress with a Pokemon skin on it.
Right on. It's awesome. I've never seen so many overweight teenagers out walking around. Like my daughter said, Pokemon Go did in one weekend what Michelle Obama tried to get done in 4 years, or 8 years, right? Like all of a sudden, teenagers are out walking around the streets. Parks are full. Right? It's crazy.
If you want to bring people together, if you want all different walks of life people all of a sudden having random conversations they would never would have had before, I can't tell you how many people I have talked to on the streets of Omaha, in my apartment complex, everywhere. And people that we probably would have had no reason to communicate before, and we start a conversation, and it's awesome. That is what I like. I'm not even a huge big into like Pokemon, but I love just the concept of it and the fun nature of the game.
Yeah. So if you haven't checked it out, go out to theaverageguy.tv, look in the reviews section, and thanks, Emily, for writing that for us. She totally unsolicited. She goes, I just couldn't not write this article, and I needed a good place to post it. Would you post it at theaverageguy.tv because it fit your gadget motif just perfectly? So she recommends like a battery and an electronic insect repellent and some earbuds and some stuff, right? Really, really cool stuff when it comes down to that. So, Emily, thanks for doing that, and that's posted out there if you want to take a peek at it as well. We're changing the newsletter. Last thing here. We're changing the newsletter. We're going to go weekly on it, so if you were subscribed to it and you don't want to get a weekly communication from me, just go ahead and unsubscribe. Not a big deal. You won't hurt my feelings. But we will be posting, as I post every show, I'm going to send out an email behind that, mostly kind of just an update. Like tonight, we talked a little bit about what we talked about on the show. And I had Edward on. We talked about Bitcoin. The conversation was awesome. Blah blah blah. Then here's and I'm going to be in California for the weekend. Stuff like that. And then I might say, here's the next 4 shows. So if you've ever wondered, everybody has always asked me, Mike, like, could you just talk about what's coming up? And I've never done that. Right now I know. So Edward, actually, you got featured last week as we were talking about you coming up. And I got some great feedback from people saying they really appreciated seeing the next 4 weeks of shows. So if you haven't signed up for the newsletter, head over to theaverageguy.tv/newsletter. I always post a copy over there. So if you don't want to subscribe to it but you want to see it, just head over to theaverageguy.tv/newsletter. It's there. You don't have to get spammed from me. But if you'd rather have the convenience of getting that put into your email box every week, register for it. Just give me your email, and I don't spam you. You will get that every week. But theaverageguy.tv/newsletter. We're live every Thursday, and I'm setting records on just the number of Thursdays that we're going to get it done here in 2016. We're live every Thursday, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern, out here at theaverageguy.tv/live. We got some good stuff coming up for you. We've been looking forward to this conversation, so Edward, thanks for doing it. Next week, Rich Hay is coming on. I mentioned we interviewed Ben Chu from In Focus. We're going to play that. It'll go to the recorded feed only, but Rich Hay is going to come on. We're going to talk about the Windows 10. Kind of the update that is coming here on August 2nd. Nathaniel Lindley and Chip are coming from Chip from Making Dad's show is coming. We're going to talk about Chromebooks the week after that. Chris Nessie is on to talk about EdTech. That's going to be a good one. Chris is a good guy, and so you're not going to want to miss that one. And then Dwayne's back. Dwayne Robinson is back on the 11th of August to talk about Azure. And so we got some great stuff. You do not want to miss the live show. 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern, averageguy.tv/live. We're back next week. With that, we'll say goodnight, everybody.